Set a jar of dried oregano on the table. Now set a tiny bottle of oregano essential oil beside it. The label uses the same plant name. The smell may even point in the same direction, sharp, green, medicinal. But the two objects do not belong to the same world. One belongs to a kitchen shelf. The other belongs to a much narrower category where concentration changes the questions you have to ask. This is where the phrase natural antibiotic starts to fall apart. It sounds useful, it sounds old, practical, maybe even safer than modern medicine, but it often hides the most important part of plant knowledge. Which version of the plant are we talking about? A leaf, a tea, a bark, a capsule, a gel, a resin, an essential oil? When all of those collapse into one plant name, the knowledge gets smaller, not stronger. This is not a video about replacing antibiotics. Serious infections, deep wounds, fever, spreading redness, difficulty breathing, or severe symptoms need qualified medical care. The real story here is more precise and more interesting. Some plants have compounds researchers study. Some have old food or household traditions. Some are useful in one form and risky in another. The plant was never the whole story. The version of the plant was.
The mistake is not curiosity. Curiosity is good. The mistake is using one phrase for too many things. Traditional use is one category. It tells us what people valued, prepared, or noticed. Lab evidence is another category. It can show that a compound behaves a certain way under controlled conditions. Food use is another. A spice in dinner is not the same as a concentrated extract. The phrase natural antibiotic blurs those lines. So instead of ranking plants by which one sounds strongest, we are going to follow a different trail, the traps that make people misunderstand them. The first trap begins with oregano.
Crush dried oregano between your fingers, and the plant becomes immediate. It is warm, sharp, slightly bitter. It belongs to sauce, roasted vegetables, soup, and the smell of a kitchen that has been used for years. Then look again at the oil bottle. That is the name trap. People hear oregano and think they understand the object, but dried oregano, oregano tea, oregano capsules, and oregano essential oil are not just different packaging choices, they are different questions. Oregano is often discussed because of compounds such as carvacrol, which has been studied for antimicrobial activity in lab settings. That makes the plant interesting. It does not turn the herb into an infection treatment. The problem begins when a lab compound, a dinner herb, and a concentrated oil are forced into one casual claim. The oil is not the herb turned up louder. It is crossed into another category. That is why oregano belongs first. It shows the central mistake clearly. The plant name stayed the same, while the risk, concentration, and evidence changed. And once you see that in oregano, you start seeing it everywhere.
Thyme feels safer because it arrives as steam. A few small leaves, woody stems, a cup of hot water. The smell rises quickly, dry, herbal, almost medicinal before anyone says anything medical. Older household traditions often place thyme near the throat in the winter kitchen. A warm infusion can feel comforting. Its aromatic compounds, including thymol, are part of why researchers and herbal traditions have both paid attention to it. But comfort can become an overclaim very quickly. A tea that feels soothing is still a tea. A gargle is still a gargle. It does not become treatment for bronchitis, fever, chest pain, or a worsening respiratory infection. Thyme's lesson is quiet but important. The body can feel relief from a warm preparation, while the actual illness still needs proper care. And the next trap is even more ordinary. Sometimes the risk is not that a plant feels exotic, it is that it feels too familiar.
Break a rosemary sprig and the smell clings to your fingers. It is pine-like, resinous, stubborn. The leaves are narrow and tough, doped more like needles than salad greens. In a kitchen, rosemary feels controlled, a few leaves on potatoes, a sprig in a roasting pan. Familiarity makes it seem harmless. That is the trap. A culinary sprig asks one set of questions. A concentrated aromatic oil asks another. Rosemary contains compounds that make it interesting to researchers, but the familiar herb on a cutting board should not make concentrated preparations feel casual. The kitchen can lower your guard. With rosemary, the lesson is not dramatic, it is practical. Familiar plants still deserve form-specific caution. Then the story shifts from familiarity to amount.
Cinnamon enters the room as comfort. A pinch over oatmeal, a brown dusting on fruit, a curled stick of bark in a warm drink. It smells sweet before it tastes sharp, which is why people rarely think of it as a plant that needs boundaries. But cinnamon is bark, and bark can be prepared in very different ways. A pinch in food belongs to one story. A capsule, extract, or oil belongs to another. The plant did not become more intelligent when it became more concentrated. In some cases, the margin simply became narrower. This is the dose trap. Cinnamon contains aromatic compounds that make it scientifically interesting, but a compound name does not erase the importance of amount, route, and person. Someone sprinkling cinnamon into a recipe is not making the same decision as someone taking high-dose products every day. The old kitchen had limits built into it: taste, spoon, recipe, occasion. Modern supplement language can remove those limits while keeping the same comforting name. That is why cinnamon matters here. It shows how a harmless-feeling spice can become a different conversation once the amount changes. But amount is not the only way a plant changes. Sometimes the change begins the moment you prepare it. Garlic does not wait quietly. Press a clove under the flat side of a knife and the room changes. The smell sharpens almost at once, sulfurous and alive, as if the plant only begins speaking after it is damaged. That is the preparation trap. With garlic, preparation is not decoration. Crushing, chopping, cooking, eating it fresh, or taking it as a supplement can lead to different questions. The plant has a long food history, and its sulfur compounds have been studied in many contexts, but that does not justify turning garlic into a cure claim. Garlic should not be presented as a treatment for infection. It should not be turned into cancer prevention advice. It should not be used as a reason to delay care. In food, garlic belongs to the kitchen. In concentrated products, the conversation changes. Dose, medication, condition, timing, and personal risk all matter. This is where old plant knowledge becomes more exact than online advice. It does not ask only, is garlic good? It asks, prepared how, used how often, and by whom? By now, the pattern should feel strange. The plants are not failing. Something else is.
By now, you may have noticed the strange part. None of these plants became less useful. The names became less precise. The moment leaf, oil, bark, tea, capsule, extract, and food are all collapsed into one plant name, the most useful knowledge disappears. Oregano becomes oregano. Cinnamon becomes cinnamon. Garlic becomes garlic. And then people argue about whether the plant works as if they are all talking about the same thing. They are often not. One person means dinner, another means a dropper bottle, another means a lab compound, another means a traditional preparation, another means a supplement routine. The conflict is not nature versus medicine, it is precision versus sloppy language. And the second half of this video is where that gets more physical: a famous compound, a cut leaf, and a resin from a hive.
Turmeric is almost impossible to hide. Cut the rhizome and the inside burns orange gold. The powder stains fingers, cutting boards, oil, soup, cloth, almost anything it touches. That color helped make turmeric famous. Then one compound, curcumin, became even more famous. This is the compound trap. A compound can be real, studied, and interesting, while the claims around it still become too large. Curcumin is widely discussed in research, but a famous compound does not turn a spoonful of kitchen spice into medicine. Turmeric in food, turmeric powder, and high-dose curcumin products are different practical situations. The plant's color may be dramatic, but the language still has to stay careful. The useful story is not that turmeric is a broad natural antibiotic. That phrase flattens the plant. The better story is that turmeric has food traditions, notable compounds, and a long modern research trail. But form and dose decide what conversation you are actually having. A golden powder can be valuable without becoming a promise.
Aloe vera makes the lesson visible. The leaf is thick, heavy, almost architectural. Slice it open and the clear gel appears, cool and slippery. It looks simple because you can see it. That is what makes aloe powerful as a teaching plant. The clear gel has a long topical reputation, especially around minor skin irritation. But the leaf is not only gel. Near the outer rind, the plant raises a different conversation, especially when people move from external use to internal products. This is the plant part trap. Aloe gets flattened into one word, but the gel, the whole leaf, the juice, and concentrated products do not ask the same safety questions. Topical tradition does not automatically justify internal use. Minor skin comfort is not the same as treating serious burns, deep wounds, spreading redness, or infection. Those belong in medical care. The ugly detail is that the useful-looking part and the riskier conversation sit very close together. Aloe did not hide the boundary. The cut leaf shows it. The knowledge is knowing which part you are looking at before you decide what it means. And the final example pushes the mistake even further because this time people borrow evidence from nature itself.
Propolis feels like proof before anyone explains it. Bees gather plant resins and use this dark, sticky material inside the hive. It seals, protects, and becomes part of the hive's architecture. The image is powerful, a living colony using plant resin as defense. But the hive is not a human clinical trial. That is the nature analogy trap. Propolis contains compounds such as flavonoids and phenolic acids that researchers study. It has traditional and modern use in topical and supplement forms. But the fact that something plays a protective role in a hive does not prove what it will do inside a human body. It also carries a boundary people often mention too late: allergy. Bee products are not right for everyone. A person with sensitivities, asthma concerns, or a history of reactions should not treat propolis casually. Topical use, oral supplements, and lab findings are separate categories. Propolis is valuable because it is strange, old, resinous, and biologically interesting. But its strongest lesson is restraint. Nature can be intelligent without becoming automatic evidence for human use.
So the next time you hear a plant called a natural antibiotic, do not start by asking if the plant is powerful. Ask better questions. First, what form is being discussed? Food, tea, capsule, extract, oil, gel, resin, or topical preparation? Second, what part of the plant is involved? Leaf, bark, bulb, rhizome, gel, resin, or something else? Third, what kind of evidence is carrying the claim? Traditional use, food history, lab evidence, human evidence, or just repetition online? Fourth, who is using it? A healthy adult using a culinary amount is not the same as someone pregnant, allergic, taking medication, or managing a diagnosed condition. Fifth, what should this never be used for? That last question keeps the whole story honest. These plants are not replacements for antibiotics. They are not emergency care. They are not for self-treating serious infections, deep wounds, fever, spreading redness, difficulty breathing, or severe symptoms. Once those boundaries are clear, the plants do not become boring. They become visible again.
Return to the table. The oregano jar is still separate from the oil bottle. Cinnamon bark still curls beside the capsule. Garlic still waits crushed on the cutting board. Turmeric has stained the spoon. Aloe gel shines inside the cut leaf. Propolis clings dark and resinous to the dropper. They all come from the living world, but they do not become one thing just because we want one simple phrase. The plants did not become simpler. Our language did. When leaf, oil, tea, bark, gel, food, extract, and capsule all become just one plant name, we stop seeing the knowledge that older traditions worked so hard to preserve. The plant was never the secret. Knowing which version of the plant you were actually looking at, that was. If you want to keep learning which old plant uses still make sense, which ones need caution, and which ones deserve to be left alone, subscribe to Plants They Forgot. And tell me in the comments, which plant did you only know by name before realizing the version changes the whole story?